We have a good number of people that have joined us at our advertised starting time at 7 o'clock. So there will be time for questions, of course, but what a great way to start with a few catch-ups and such joy at the beginning. But by way of formality, my name's Jeff Brodie, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second Lonergan Australasia Spring Seminar. That is our second seminar under the theme Authentic Friendships, Supporting Vulnerable Democracies. And a little bit of housekeeping at the start. I don't have to point you to where the toilets are. That's a domestic issue for each of you. But there is the Lonergan Australasia website that I would, just typing in Lonergan Australasia will bring you there with a wide variety of resources and links to other websites of the Lonergan community around the world. And certainly the Lonergan Australasia website is one that is updated regularly. Thank you, Sean. And on that website, there is an invitation to become a member at no cost to the Lonergan Australasia and to be kept up to date with such seminars and topics and conversations in the Lonergan community from around the world. And that would also be a way of keeping up to date with the regular invitation for our group that meets on the second Tuesday of each month, where we discuss a Lonergan text and often a text closely related to Lonergan. And you would be most encouraged and warmly invited to join that group. And we start at 5 o'clock and usually conclude about 8 p.m. on that Tuesday. So I can mention those things again at the end, but the website is the main pass there. But to begin this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Matthew Ogilvie, who is a professor in the School of Philosophy and Theology at the University of Notre Dame, Australia. Matthew holds bachelor's and master's degrees from the Sydney College of Divinity and a PhD from the University of Sydney. And his master degree was supervised by Father Peter Beer and his doctorate work by Father Tom Daly. So there's no questioning the Australian Lonergan provenance of Matthew's preparation. And again, I acknowledge the presence of Peter here this evening.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Before his work at Notre Dame, Professor Ogilvie taught at Australian Catholic University and the Catholic Institute of Sydney. During 2003, he was a postdoctoral research fellow at Boston College in the Lonergan Centre as a John Charles Beer Travelling Fellow. Between 2003 and 2009, he taught at the University of Dallas, where he also served as Director of Philosophy and Letters and Coordinator of Online Education for the University of Dallas School of Ministry. And also relevant to this presentation, Matthew is Vice President of the Liberal Party of Western Australia. He also serves as a delegate to the Federal Council and as a Patron Vice President of Policy and Patron Vice President of the Young Liberals. And relevant to his topic tonight, Lonergan, Finality, Love and Politics. And what a great challenge it is in our current environment to have love and politics mentioned positively in the same sentence. This paper takes its inspiration from Bernard Lonergan's Finality, Love and Marriage. It will propose that Lonergan's explanation of finality and love, applied to friendship and politics, can diagnose the cause of various political problems today and show a better way at party, national and international levels. The paper will draw on the presenter's experience in politics and in the work in the field of terrorism. The paper will engage with Lonergan and Aristotle's account of friendship. We'll open by drawing upon Australian Aboriginal law concerning close relationships. And finally, the paper will highlight the destructive influence of a purely horizontal finality in politics and political relationships, and how this can be overcome with a focus on a vertical finality, concepts so important to our Lonergan community. So, getting out of the way now, welcome Matthew, and we look forward to your presentation and to our conversation afterwards.
Thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate your very kind introduction. And I'd like to thank everyone for being here online tonight, but especially Father Peter Beer, my master supervisor, also the chief celebrant at Elizabeth and my wedding some years ago, and also his dear brother John, may he rest in peace, who sponsored the John Charles Beer Travelling Fellowship, which helped me so much in 2003 and also beyond. I simply would not be here without the help of Father Peter and his brother Dr. John. I have sent a bullet point outline of this presentations so that I could speak more freely, and Sean will share that. My plan tonight, as I see the abstract, the introduction that I sent, I often joke, because having the advantage of being from Western Australia, I can usually say, as I was revising this presentation on the plane, I made a few changes. But what's happened over the past week is I've been looking at this. I have had some major changes, so I hope I don't disappoint you too much, but I've realised the fertility of Lonergan on finality and applying it to a number of areas. One of them is I've actually got a full-length article draft done on diagnosing the problems of the West Australian Liberal Party as being stuck in horizontal finality, and relating Lonergan's vertical and ultimate finality to Menzies' vision. So if anyone is interested in that, if you need something to help you get to sleep, I'm certainly happy to share the draft on the understanding that it's not spread too widely. So my interest in Lonergan's philosophy of finality was prompted unconventionally. I have done a fair bit of research and publication work in Australian Aboriginal culture, and that led me to, I think, the key to world peace. And that is the mother-in-law rule. And I can assure you that this rule is true. I've had it verified by a number of Aboriginal elders. And this rule prohibits one from talking directly to their mother-in-law. It's against the rules. And if you are stuck, I asked an elder up in the Territory, if you're in the same room and you can't avoid talking to them, you can't say, Jane, can you pass me the sugar? It's got to be impersonal. Hey, Mary's mother, would you pass the sugar? But normally, you cannot talk directly to your in-law. And the genius is, as I looked at it, is that in recognizing that a horizontal relationship between a person and their mother-in-law is fraught with danger. So this is avoided by having an intermediary who can not only communicate messages, but also ensure that the relationship is in accord with the law, which stands above a person and their in-laws. And so the horizontal finality of speaking directly to a mother-in-law yields vertically to a peacekeeping figure and ultimately to ultimate law. I once joked, and some of my research begins with a joke. I joked that this Aboriginal rule is the key to world peace. Imagine if the same rule applied to Russians and Ukrainians, Israelis and Palestinians and others. And that ironically led me into Lonergan on finality and how Lonergan's three modes can be applied to conflict or dysfunction. So as I said, I've looked at the conflicts mentioned above, and I've also drafted an article on finality and the Liberal Party of Western Australia. Just saying that, Labor people don't laugh, because I've got a few paragraphs on the Australian Labor Party. So there's actually a great fertility of Lonergan for explaining what goes wrong in politics, national and international, and how it can be healed. So I'll just say a few words about Lonergan's philosophy of finality. Finality being the oriented tendency towards ends, and he divides finality into horizontal, vertical, and absolute, or sometimes people call it ultimate. And each finality shows how entities can fulfill or frustrate their potential. So horizontal finality signifies an orientation which is immanent and proportionate. It's dictated by the essence of an entity. It just arises simply from what a thing is. It's what is normal to a thing. But the problem with horizontal finality is that the appetition of a thing is commensurate motives and processes. So horizontal finality is essential in the sense that it sustains the level of being without any external dependency. The challenge of horizontal finality, whether it's an individual organism or a political party or a nation, is that it risks stagnation if it's not integrated in an upward fashion. And that's where vertical finality is so important. It goes beyond the essence of an entity. It drives things upward from lower to higher levels through the plurality of concrete fertility. So we see this, for example, tools serve art, that's instrumentally. By disposition, experiences yield insight, and materially substrates bring out forms, or obedientially creatures receive grace. Vertical finality, we understand now, is statistical rather than certain. It does operate to a great degree by chance, and it assumes a hierarchy in which lower schemes are sublated into emergent wholes. So atoms are sublated into organisms, senses into intellect. What's important about vertical finality is that it demands self-transcendence. Something must go beyond itself to have this vertical orientation. And it should be done with conscious operations, experience, understanding, judging, and deciding. These orient something beyond self-regard to moral being and the common good. Now, thirdly, absolute finality concerns the universal reference of all things to God as intrinsic good. That is, God as the end of ends of any orientation. And Lonergan shows that absolute finality transcends the limits of essence, with beings tending differently in their own way towards their ultimate attainment in God. And importantly, absolute finality integrates horizontal and vertical finalities and brings them to their ultimate realization in God. And Lonergan argues that these distinctions underpin cosmic dynamism and historic dynamism. So without vertical orientation, horizontal routines can develop into entropy or chaos. But without absolute orientation, vertical finalities advances can lack ultimate coherence. And what I find exciting is that Lonergan's explanation of these distinct finalities can diagnose the operation of bodies such as political bodies, nations, and parties. For example, dysfunction can be diagnosed as a fixation on the horizontal, but recovery can be found through reorienting to vertical and absolute finality. I'm going to, if I have time, I'll talk about the WA Liberal Party, which is a fascinating case. I'd like to apply what I've just spoken about, that is to apply Lonergan's finality to Ukraine and Russia, Israel and the Palestinians. Looking first at the Russia-Ukraine war, which is, I don't think you can use the superlative to say how horrible it is. It's a grueling contest of attrition. Casualties from both sides exceed 1.1 million combined, and both sides are exhausted. 69% of Ukrainians now want a negotiated end. That's up from earlier commitments that want a total victory. 2/3 of Russians now favour talks over escalation. Although one has to be very careful about both sets of statistics. I did speak to a Russian a while ago, and I said, so how do you guys find it under Putin? And he said, oh, we can't complain. I said, really, that good? He said, no, you don't understand. We really can't complain. So when we talk about statistics from Ukraine and Russia, we need to be skeptical. However, what I think is indisputable is that both sides are sick to death of the fighting and the fact that there seems to be no end to it. However, at the moment, Ukrainians have proposed a ceasefire at the current contact line, but Moscow continues to demand territorial concessions. Looking at the standard analysis of this situation, the political theories usually emphasize geopolitical realpolitik or identity constructs. But if we understand emergent probability and finality, we have a very, very different understanding of the conflict. In terms of horizontal finality, Russia is pursuing a reconstitution of the empire. Ukraine, on the other hand, wants the sovereignty that it gained post-2014. Now, both pursuits are proportionate to historical essence, and both pursuits are yielding group bias in the war of attrition. This is manifest in the current stalemate we see with Russian gains at high cost and Ukrainian defense via very high cost air defenses, high cost in both financial and personal costs. Through the conventional lens of what we would see as horizontal finality, we see a Russian desire for geopolitical security, even if that desire does seem to be a bit paranoid and at the cost of thousands of casualties. But we also see Ukrainian proportionate finality of cultural integrity and independence, even if support for the battle is losing support and international support for Ukraine is waning. In short, both sides are in the mire of horizontal finality. Going beyond the proportion of horizontal finality, though, vertical finality could elevate the situation. First, by sublating security into stability. So stability is vertically oriented, whereas security is horizontally oriented. So that sublation would mean that Russia's territorial gains would be sublated into Eurasian pacts, and Ukraine's defense would be sublated vertically into transatlantic bonds. Now, Russian vertical finality can be seen in support for negotiation, and Ukrainian vertical finality can be seen in possible EU candidacy. Just a quick note, with these conflicts that I'm talking about, I'm not going to take sides. I do have a strong opinion, but I don't think that would help with either of the cases I'm looking at. But what about absolute finality? Beyond verticality, absolute finality would transcend all of this in unrestricted love, converging mere in Russian and Ukrainian peace, beyond nationalist eschatology, such as the mythology of denazification that we have. If grace were to prevail in the conflict, the horrors of the current situation would yield to providence. Turning attention from horizontally final grievances and upwards to ultimate values would see the parties advance, ideally in love, but at least with concern for the other and in unity. Having said that, such an absolute orientation would require serious self-appropriation that does seem unlikely in the present. So Lonergan's finality would, if applied, recast the Russia-Ukraine conflict as an ascent, horizontal attrition to vertical pacts, to absolute peace gained through finality of the unrestricted good. Applying similar insights to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I'm referring specifically to the conflict post-October 7. At the horizontal level, Israelis and Palestinians are pursuing proportionate ends that are dictated by historical essence. The Israelis are seeking security in a Jewish homeland. They do this with an experience that's rooted in trauma and existential threat. Palestinians are seeking self-determination amid dispossession and occupation. They want dignity and they want statehood. And because of that horizontal orientation, the majority of people on both sides see no end to the conflict. Both sides remain stuck in horizontal finality. Their relationship is largely transactional. For example, the trade of just under 2,000 Palestinian prisoners for 20 living Israeli hostages and the bodies of 15 more. There's a limit there to horizontal finality, which means that any relationship is based on mutual suspicion and perpetual hostility. It means that the horizontal finalities we see in the Holy Land foster silos of common consciousness, which do nothing but perpetuate the ongoing cycles of violence. But if we turn to vertical finality, or the possibilities of vertical finality, the weirdest source came up, and I read this years ago. And look, you are never going to hear Lonergan and Gaddafi in the same presentation ever again. But I'm going to mention Gaddafi. Gaddafi, was he mad or was he a genius? Both. He indicated that the Jews and Arabs of the Holy Land should abandon what we call their horizontally oriented hatred and find common ground in what we would call the vertical and absolute finality that would be discovered through shared experience. Gaddafi pointed out that the Jews had a history of mistreatment and persecution by the Europeans. But, he added, the Palestinians had an analogous experience of mistreatment and exploitation by their fellow Arabs. In other words, and if Gaddafi had the advantage of Lonergan and a number of other things, if we look vertically and absolutely, Gaddafi was saying that the Jews and Arabs could ascend through horizontal and absolute finality if they could discover a unity grounded in the first place, not in what they want from each other, but in shared misery. In the current situation, we do see a certain vertical finality in which we see a hierarchy in which lower ends serve higher ones through instrumental or participative modes. So horizontal goods are sublated. So the horizontal orientation of Israeli security now participates in regional stability through the Abraham Accords, while the Palestinian liberation orientation ascends to confederated governance. Verticality, or vertical orientation from Israel, emerges in supporting the hostage deals with Hamas, tied to normalization with the Saudis and UAE, and with Gaza administration reforms. Palestinian orientations show fluctuating support for the two-state solution, while the majority back ceasefire but oppose Hamas disarmament, which is signaling at a vertical level some potential via Arab mediation. On the other hand, and now I'm going to mention Donald Trump, and I apologize for that, but I cannot get away from him in this case. How did the current ceasefire come to be? It was not through horizontal finality. The Israelis wanted something, the Hamas wanted something else. It was give, take, it was a transaction. Trump came along and, among other things, humiliated Netanyahu into apologizing to Qatar. At the same time, he forced Hamas into releasing the hostages. So the resolution, albeit temporary, was gained not through the horizontal interchange of the Israelis and Palestinians, but through the vertical influence of Trump. But Trump, of course, is not the Messiah, so he cannot give us the ultimate resolution. So we turn to absolute finality. And that absolute finality should orient all toward God, transcending the finite hierarchies and resolving dialectics in unrestricted love. And this is where there is some potential. If people representing the Abrahamic traditions can converge on shalom and salam in a peace that is oriented absolutely. There's a story that might illustrate that. an Israeli and a Palestinian that I happen to know, and I'll respect their privacy and not say who they were. But they're discussing the current situation, and one says, "Do you know we both want the same thing?" And the other one goes, "Yes, we want the Holy Land." And I mean, like it's Middle Eastern dark humor. It's even darker than Australia. But the reality is that one of them was talking in terms of vertical and absolute finality. The other one was talking in terms of horizontal finality. Now, which one was it? That's the secret, but they both understood each other. They both understood that the resolution is not with trading with horizontal finality, but in seeking a vertical finality where their concerns, their orientation is sublated into something higher, but ultimately oriented towards God. So understanding finality through Lonergan, we can reframe the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as purposeful ascent, from horizontal entrenchment to vertical integration to absolute hope. And ultimately, peace will not lie in horizontal or vertically oriented power, but in loving the absolute good that is God. How are we going with it? I know I've been talking a lot. Do you want me to go on to the Liberal Party, or do we want to stop and throw around some questions or observations? Okay, I'll just go on with the Liberal Party then.
Is it?
That's what we've all been waiting for, Matthew.
Okay, so for my many sins, I've become a state vice president for the Liberal Party, and I've discovered that the job description is he who solves everything. So when people aren't happy with the president, they come to me. When they're not happy with the state director, they come to me. When we lose an election, they really come to me. I joked that I had to, well, just after the state election, I joked that my phone was burning so hot, I had to replace it. Then 2 weeks later, it did break. I'm not sure that correlation is causation. But look, it is no secret that the party, especially in Western Australia, has been through a lot of problems. And what I'm going to comment on tonight is not anything secret. I'm relying on information that is out there in the public domain. What I found with the party is that it exemplifies an organisation that is mired in horizontal finality. It's fixated on proportionate ends. What are these? Factional dominance, branch stacking, and pre-selection victories. For these sorts of things, I mean, they might be good for the people who get pre-selected, but they only sustain bare survival. They do not foster emergence. And Lonergan's explanation of an essence-bound orientation that we see in horizontal finality shows up in the party as self-referential power games in which party branches become conflict zones for imminent control instead of being vehicles for higher ideals. So Lonergan would explain the counterproductive party practices and its problems to the limit of appetition to commensurate terms. That is, people are only seeking power within the isolated scheme of the party, but without any vertical upthrust to earning voter trust or benefiting the community. So the party's electoral failure and its entrapment in what has been called corrosive factionalism reflects Lonergan's warning about horizontal finality. Without a proper orientation and without vertical and absolute finality, it wallows in stagnation because the relevant schemes recur without innovation. Concretely, this means that being stuck in the mire of horizontal finality has meant that pre-selection were based on loyalty rather than merit, which produced inferior candidates. And we saw this in the catastrophe, well, depending on perspective. For the Labor, it was a great victory. For the Liberals, it was a catastrophe. We had a policy vacuum and a capitulation before the election, which meant that we only won 2 seats in the Legislative Assembly. So to put the point into plain English, being mired in horizontal finality, factionalism led to inferior candidates and a lack of policy and vision. The reality is that without radical change, the party risks being stuck in schemes recurring in futile leadership spills. Now, everyone in the Liberal Party of Western Australia knows about this. They've been complaining about it since the 1990s on the days of Noel Crichton Brown. People identify the problem, but they cannot explain it, and that's what Lonergan does. Lonergan clarifies, or using Lonergan, we can clarify that without vertical fertility, without plurality yielding higher forms, the isolation of horizontal finality generates entropy or chaos. Without absolute finality, even partial transcendence is doomed to fail. And so the West Australian Liberals wallow in the mire of horizontal finality. They're certainly not alone, but their turmoil is a cautionary tale of an institution at risk of serious, even ultimate decline. Now, much could be said about other parties in Australia and overseas. For example, one could diagnose the challenges of Labor and relate them to a fixation on horizontal finality, and relate that to the ultimate finality called for in Chifley's Light on the Hill speech. But that's for another presentation. What I found fascinating, though, was to reread Sir Robert Menzies' Forgotten People broadcasts in the light of Lonergan. I'm a big believer in Menzies and his vision. I think that he was certainly a deep thinker as well as a master organizer. But reading Menzies again through the eyes of Lonergan and understanding finality really diagnoses the problems of the party and shows a way forward. Menzies' Forgotten People broadcasts show a political philosophy that transcends horizontal skirmishes. He reoriented his new party towards vertical integration and absolute truth. He rejected class warfare and identity politics, at least what we would call identity politics, which happen on the horizontal level. But instead, he upheld, and I quote, the ambitious, independent, and moral individual who would advance a party that would champion a broad church of enterprise and dignity. So Menzies promoted liberal, big L, and small l liberal values, including liberty and freedom, rule of law, and volunteerism. These sorts of things embody Lonergan's vertical finality, in which lower party routines are sublated into higher societal forms. So if we consider vertical finality, the principles of Menzies and his values thrust a party from factional isolation into emergent probability. We see this, for example, in his reference to the material home of home ownership, which stakes citizens in national continuity, instrumentally serving progress while materially prompting patriotism from economic substrata. In other words, something that may be as simple as owning a home, according to Menzies, will bring out vertically oriented goods, patriotism, and progress. In contrast to the horizontal finality of branch stacking, the liberalism championed by Menzies requires self-transcendence. That means a vertical obedience to emergent justice. And in terms of absolute finality, Menzies grounded his philosophy in transcendent goods. He promoted, and I quote, the fierce independence of spirit, end quote, against state overreach. That aligns with Lonergan's all things oriented towards God. This meant that rights connoted duties under tolerance. He found that the crown symbolized unity, so that an individual freeman, in the language of his time, accepts his or her responsibility before God. And so he rejected the false discipline of autocracy, but instead found that replaced by self-imposed moral order. So rather than the horizontal distribution of resources, he saw social justice as something in which the strong would protect the weak, something that reflects what we call obediential finality, in which finite policies are absorbed into divine equity. So there's a plea of West Australian Liberals to stay true to their guiding principles, and that was reflected in a speech given by Senator Michaelia Cash at State Conference. This reflects a dual finality. An end to the infighting of factionalism would vertically integrate the factions into Menzies' vision of service. Absolute fidelity would base renewal in ultimate norms. Bringing together Lonergan's understanding of horizontal, vertical, and absolute finality, we can understand how Menzies would offer WA Liberals an escape from the current mire, embracing vertical progress through volunteer spirit and absolute coherence in human freedoms and ultimate values. Now, this is something I've been working on personally for some time. As a state councillor and now state vice president, I've been involved in more pre-selections than I care to remember. And I ask the same questions of every candidate because look, if you think of getting into politics, it's the best way to get Christmas cards. Someone noticed we had a picture of our living room, Christmas 2023, lots and lots of Christmas cards. The living room, Christmas 2024, not so. And someone said, how come the sudden drop in Christmas cards? I said, 2023 was pre-selection season. So I do speak to a lot of people, and I'd ask them, what's your vision of Menzies? What's your understanding of liberal values? And not many people could understand that. And the successful candidates, those who did very well, I found, could not only identify liberal values, but identify them in what we would call with a vertical or an absolute finality. Having said that, Lonergan explains how a fidelity to Menzies' vision can map vertical pathways from the party's current horizontal mire. Vertically, reforms can sublate factional schemes into democratic emergence, and a direction against infighting demands conscious operations, the experience of electoral pain, the understanding of the party's roots, the judgment of candidates by the light of liberty, and the decision for goods that are transcendent. Now, reports and audits have urged measures, but those measures can be understood best not horizontally, but in their vertical finality, in which they would dispose a party to inclusive platforms that recapture the forgotten people. So in terms of absolute finality, Menzies' broad church can bring together faith, but without extremism, in obedience to ultimate values that unify people. Ideally, leadership rifts would heal through absolute duties, and policy would emerge through moral discernment, not factional isolation. Conceived in terms of absolute finality, renewal would transcend survival, achieving the coherence of which Lonergan wrote. Before I conclude, there is one other thing I've worked on as well as a side project, because I'm always disturbed by Nazism. How could it be that something so wicked and evil as Nazism could be so powerful? And these are only very, very rough ideas, but I've been exploring this of late. But I think that Lonergan's work on finality can unpack and explain Hitler's Nazi ideology. Now, absolute finality is meant to orient one to God, with every good participating in divine love. But my thesis at the moment, or my hypothesis, is that what Hitler did was that he inverted that finality. he saw his mission as, and I'll quote Mein Kampf here, the will of the Almighty Creator. But his Creator was not that of divine love, but of a providence rooted in the eternal struggle for race purity. The reality is that Hitler believed in the power of a religion. He did say that he thought that the significance of the establishment of a religion was more powerful and more enduring than any state, party, or nation. And that's why Nazism basically ran as a religion and Hitler as some sort of God figure. But Lonergan's finality helps us understand what happened there. Hitler's Mein Kampf perverts the finality identified by Lonergan. Horizontal finality is made rigid by paranoia, and vertical finality is perverted by tyranny. And absolute finality is not that of divine love, but of transcendent hatred and eternal struggle. So just to conclude, Russians and Ukrainians, Jews and Arabs all want peace and security. Yet the current world of realpolitik keeps them mired in horizontal finality. And that's reflected in the conversation between the Jew and the Arab I referred to. We want the same thing. And the other one says, yes, we both want the Holy Land. One was referring to vertical and ultimate finality. The other was complaining that they were stuck in horizontal finality. Lonergan's account of finality diagnoses their current situation and its futility and shows a way both forward and upward through vertical finality and ultimate finality. We see a similar situation in the woes of the WA Liberal Party, in which everyone seems to refer to Menzies, but no one can unlock his power. I'd argue that the people contributing to the current woes of the party are stuck in horizontal finality, and this is perpetuated through proportionate measures such as factionalism and branch stacking. However, if we understand horizontal, vertical, and ultimate finality, we can unleash the radical political vision of Menzies, which is best appreciated through understanding vertical and ultimate finality. With the examples that I've looked at, and I've found that finality, the threefold finalities of Lonergan, are a great way of unlocking so much. I've referred to a few cases. If I wanted to get onto truly dangerous ground, I talk about US internal politics, the state of the Democratic Party, the MAGA Republicans, and that sort of thing. But if you ask me to comment on that, I will develop a sore throat very quickly. Things going on in Europe, and the mindset of terrorists. What I find is that finality provides great lessons for healing democracies at the party level, at the national level, at the international level, and especially by fostering friendships or relationships that are not only horizontal, but vertically and ultimately oriented. Thank you all so much for your attention. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew. Now, the opportunity for questions. And so could I ask, there's a few ways that we could do it. There's the reaction button or tab on the bottom of your screen. And when you click on that, the option to raise a hand comes up, and we could work our way through those people that raise their hand. Another option is through the chat, if you want to type your question. And because we do have such a generous attendance tonight, and not wanting to limit the discussion, could I ask that you ask one question and then with maybe one follow-up clarification before we then move on to another question. So that would allow us to access the diversity of responses to give us much to go away and further reflect upon. So given that, and I've got the screen here. So again, those options, the raise hand button or or through the chat. Is there someone that would like to open our questioning, please? And Peter, yes, your hand.
Just a brief question. Have you seen possibilities for sublation to take place from the horizontal to the vertical at all?
Definitely. I mean, that has to happen, and this is with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How to put it? Vertical finality would sublate security, which is at the horizontal level. So, at one level, Putin and his followers want a secure Russia. The problem is that's based on paranoia. I mean, Putin believes that Europe and the USA want to invade Russia. So that gets in the way of vertical finality. However, there's nothing wrong with the security of Russia, its people, and the security of its borders, but that does have to be sublated into a more just world order. So yes, Peter, you're absolutely right. The horizontal needs to be sublated into the vertical sublated into the ultimate or absolute. That's a very good point.
I wasn't saying that you hadn't thought of it. It's just I haven't brought it out yet.
Yeah. But yeah. So I mean, what one of the problems is, and you've just given me an idea that perhaps our horizontal concerns are not sublated into the vertical and ultimate because of original sin. You can. I'm just testing an idea here, but anyone can reasonably tell you that the Russia-Ukraine conflict could have been solved by diplomacy. The reason that didn't happen was an irrational blindness to the possibilities of that sublation. And yes, it is irrational. But yeah, the short answer is yes, it's very, very important. And also if you're consciously looking at sublation, then people don't have to lose what they have. And I think that's again the paranoia that's driving the Russian side in Ukraine, is this fear that if they form a peaceful relationship with Ukraine, that they will lose something, be it territory, dignity, pride, or whatever. And that's the great challenge of reassuring them that.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. Sean, please.
Matthew, just thinking about sublation. So the higher sublates the lower, and that's the goal that you want to aim at. However, there is another part to that, which is that the lower provides the conditions for the achievement of the higher.
Yes.
So unless those, like for the Liberal Party, unless there is those processes going on internally, that are commensurate with that higher value, but those lower processes need to work in order to be able for you to achieve that higher value. So, and you can see that in terms of what you were suggesting around Russia and Ukraine, that there needs to be security, for there to be stability, and there needs to be stability for for a greater good.
Yes. No, you're absolutely right there. I mean, you cannot have stability without security, which I think applies to the Russians and Ukrainians, the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Yeah.
There's actually an interesting example of that, and I don't know how many of us watch the Netflix show called Fauda, F-A-U-D-A. It's on Netflix. Was that a yes from Robin? Yeah. It's a fictionalized story of an undercover Israeli unit that goes into enemy territory and does stuff. It has more Arab viewers than it has Jewish viewers because it's as fair and balanced as you can probably get in that part of the world. But there's an interesting scene, or a series of scenes, but one in particular, where an Israeli colonel is meeting with the head of the Palestinian Protective Service. And I'm not going to spoil what happens, but these two gentlemen from opposite sides are sharing security knowledge, they're sharing insights, they're sharing strategies, and these people are meant to be the worst of enemies. Yet this is actually what happens, where the Israeli services will cooperate with the Palestinian Protective Service. Why? Because they have a common enemy, which was Hamas and probably still is Hamas to a great extent. So the Palestinian Protective Service was formed to basically stop Fatah or PLO guys from getting whacked by Hamas. Why did the Israelis and Palestinians cooperate so? It's because they're driven into a certain finality by the fear of what may happen. So that's vertical. I don't think that's ultimate because they're not there yet. But could that cooperation, which is essentially an anti-Hamas cooperation, could that occur without the horizontal, which is Sean's point, without the Israeli services and without the Palestinian services? They couldn't. So you have to have that horizontal stuff, and it has to be working well before it can be sublated into something higher. The same thing with any political party. You can have Menzies' Forgotten People, you can have Chifley's Light on the Hill. That's great, that's lofty. Those visions are culture changing. But if your branches aren't working, if the people at the coalface, the people at the grassroots, if they're not doing what they need to be doing, then the whole thing falls apart. There's actually, if you apply this, and please don't think I'm saying this to be partisan now, but it's a problem faced by One Nation. The structure of One Nation is very top heavy. I understand that in Western Australia, at least, and I'm not sure about the rest of the country, the Liberal Party has branches and divisions. The Labor Party has branches and divisions. One Nation has no branches. People join the party, and that's it. Everything is well, I shouldn't say everything, but so much of One Nation is top heavy. It's vertical and it's absolute. It's very much it's oriented towards Pauline Hanson and her ideals, but it is a party that is not very active at the grassroots. And I think Sean, you could probably earn a lot of money by explaining to One Nation what they're doing wrong. I'm not suggesting you do, by the way. But one of the reasons why One Nation is not as successful as it could be is because I think they have their absolute finality more or less okay, but not their horizontal. So it's actually the inverse of what we see with the Liberal and Labor parties at the moment. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, Sean, you're absolutely right. The lower, the horizontal, has to be working in order to be sublated and brought into the ultimate. And just with what I know of One Nation, most of which I learned from its enemies, is that membership is very portable. So One Nation claims to have had a stunning increase in membership numbers in the past few months, mostly at the expense of the Liberals. But I predict, I could be wrong, but I think I'm right, most of them will be gone and joining other parties within the next year or two. So does that sort of answer your question or comment on your observation, Sean?
I think in part, yes. Yeah.
Is there a clarification?
I suppose the other way to think about what you're talking about is that is a reference to the scale of values that Lonergan talks about. Is
Yes.
that you are talking about a movement from the lower level value, vital values of security and health, through to the religious values, which you're there talking about. So but the conditions for the religious values being achieved is that the vital values are also being achieved.
No, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now, having grown up on a farm, my only claim to fame was that I broke a crowbar. So my use of technology is limited, but I can't see any raised hands there at the moment. But so again, there we go. John, please. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, Matthew, thanks for that. Is there any connection between the Liberal Party's pondering on the environmental question about net zero? Is there
I'm sorry, the connection between Perth and Melbourne is very static right now. I think you said there are net zero problems or something.
Yeah. Well, there could be net zero problems, but
John's not as far away as Melbourne.
Oh, where are you, John?
well, I'm still part of the eastern states, though, in South Australia.
Okay, yeah, that's.
Yeah.
For West Australians, that's east, because we are. I mean, talking about horizontal finality, West Australia is the state of horizontal finality.
Yes, but Matthew, I was just wondering about whether there's a danger, say, for example, with the Liberal Party locking itself into an anti concern for the environment and not opening itself up to richer values that really could be something productive not only for the party but for the nation.
Look, you're right there. And so when I made a joke about the party and all that, please don't think I was being disrespectful to you. But look, I was actually there when the WA State Council passed a motion condemning net zero. That's the short version of it. What I didn't realise at the time was that Machiavelli was well and truly at work, and that there were two individuals who were looking to drive a wedge between the WA party and the supporters of Suzanne Lee. And what's happened since then is you've got basically and it's not actually the members themselves. So you've got Senator Michaelia Cash, who is was the Attorney General, and Andrew Hastie, who's probably one of the two likely future leaders of the party. So they're very net zero critical. They're on one side, and Suzanne Lee and the moderate Liberals are on another side. And at the moment, all of the talk is about us and them. I mean, if you think in the New Testament, I'm for Paul, I'm for Apollos was bad, you should see the party. You're a net zero person or you're a not net zero person. The danger has been that that's the level of the conversation. It's about horizontally defining factions. Very, very few people. Now, there are some people, and I have spoken with Senator Cash and also Andrew Hastie. Both of them are personally committed to a clean environment. They happen to want to pursue that in a way different to, say, the Labor and Greens, but that's fine. So they have the ultimate finality in mind, but most of their supporters don't. So you have so many people who are fixated on factions and rhetoric, but not enough people asking, well, okay, what are we going to do about climate change? And what are we going to do about clean air? But even then, people don't want to have those higher vertical and ultimate conversations because of factionalism. So yeah, it's a real danger. And when people get mired in the horizontal, they forget why we're here. The reality is that ultimately we all want to be able to breathe clean air. We all want a climate that's amenable to human and animal and plant life. But instead, we're talking about us versus them. Now, that's not a sin that's unique to the Liberal Party, but I think that's the current situation. So does that sort of address your question?
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Matthew.
And look, I hate to mention the N word, nuclear, but people and look, this happens with all of the major parties, where there's too much factionalism and not enough discussion about why we're having this discussion. You can have people who are so anti-nuclear, so that they're parked in this partisan anti-nuclear mindset that they can't appreciate the contribution nuclear might make to a clean environment. On the other hand, you have people who are so pro-nuclear that they're blinded to the possible dangers of nuclear power. And I've seen that with not just the Liberals, but even the Greens and Labor. And again, I think Lonergan has the perfect diagnosis for this. I think I've got through that without giving my personal opinion about net zero and nuclear, which I don't think is the aim of tonight.
When you said the N word, I thought you were going to say nationals. So.
God bless them. I don't know how much it's known over there, but the WA Nationals are very different to East Coast Nationals. So we have an interesting relationship with them.
Okay, so we're just within our last 8 minutes for our advertised closing time. A question from Eva, please.
Oh, yes. I was interested, given the fact that we've got these problems of that are not seemingly able to be resolved because of the fact that the various groups are at loggerheads with one another and they're stuck in this horizontal situation. has any thought been given to the possibility of coming up with a conversion and being able to set up an environment in which a conversion of real value can take place?
Well, Eva, thank you for that. You remind me of, I read through Ben Chifley's Light on the Hill speech, and I mean, I recommend that to anyone interested in Australian politics, whether you're Liberal, Labor, Green, or National, or whoever. What struck me is Chifley's self-identification as an evangelist. He calls himself an evangelist for Labor values, and I thought, I mean, you can't read too much into what someone says, but the reality is, I think Chifley would realise that people just don't, they're not born with the values, but they have to be evangelised, they have to be converted. And so, Eva, I think you're right there that people can be bloody minded and stubborn in politics. I'm one of them. But if we're transcending our limits, then the way that's done is through conversion. So you're right there, and perhaps it was a private conversation at the time, but it's been quoted so many times it doesn't matter if I share it. After the Liberals had, I think, the worst election defeat in a Westminster democracy. So in 2021, out of 59 lower house seats, we only won 2. I mean, that was just beyond belief. It was so bad, the Nationals won 5 seats, so the Nationals became the opposition. And the leader of the Liberal Party was not the leader of the opposition. And we had our state councils, we had our meetings, we formed the circular firing squad, which is what you naturally do and that sort of thing. And we came up with a whole bunch of new rules about pre-selections, rules about branches, rules about divisions, rules for rules, and all this sort of rule stuff. Our constitution was changed. At one stage in the midst of all this, I was talking to Lisa Harvey, who was the Deputy Premier at one stage, and then the Leader of the Opposition. And we said to each other, we don't need a change of rules, we need a change of culture. In other words, the way we put it is we needed conversion. Because without that conversion, you can have any number of new rules and people will find loopholes, which is precisely what happened in some cases. So we solved the problem of branch stacking, but left ourselves vulnerable to division bombing, as they call it. So yes, conversion is essential. It's crucial, and without it, and look, this applies to a political party. It applies to the Russia-Ukraine, Israel-Palestine conflicts. At one level, the conversion can be people sit down and say enough's enough. Maybe if I could give an example, a concrete one. When, you know, there's the rhetoric at the horizontal level is that Israel will not give up any territory at all. That's the territory. That's the horizontal level. But after a really, really nasty suicide bombing, Olmert, the Israeli PM, got on the hotline with Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, and he had his cabinet with him, and he got on the face. I'm going to tell him enough's enough. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Okay, you can have everything. You can have the West Bank. You can have Gaza. You can have East Jerusalem. It can be your capital. You can have everything that you want on one condition. All of this stops tonight." Now, as we know, that didn't eventuate. Why? Because the conversion just wasn't there. Abbas wasn't converted. Most of the Israeli cabinet wasn't converted. Maybe they hadn't reached absolute rock bottom to realize they needed to look up. But without that conversion, we're going to be stuck in the horizontal.
Good. So, thank you. So we've reached our advertised ending time. And so can you please join me in thanking Professor Matthew Ogilvie for his presentation and inspiring such an insightful and precise conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. And ironically, I need to go to a meeting at State Parliament House now.
And could I remind everyone of the opportunity for further meetings, and if you would have been sort of motivated and transcending to a vertical finality to join in such conversations on a regular basis by going to the Lonergan Australasia website. You'll see much materials there, but also the opportunity to join as a member and to join in our monthly conversations that occur on the second Tuesday of each month. And a reminder that our seminars will continue in the autumn of next year on our same theme. And I encourage you please to keep an eye out for that notification. And again, warmly invited to join us once again. So thank you, Matthew, for such generosity and such insight. And thank you everyone for attending. And God bless, safe travels, and look forward to meeting again as part of this seminar in the new year. Thank you.